Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for attending another edition of Ask Me Anything with the founder and chief strategist of BlockCerts International and Credence Code Technologies, Mr. Tim Vasko. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Jay. How are you today?
I'm doing great.
Great. Heck of a week out there in blockchain world, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's never a dull moment in blockchain world.
Yeah, crazy time.
Tim, we do have a couple of people on the line, and we've got a question from Kathy. She was listening to the last podcast that we did on Ask Me Anything, and she thought it was very interesting, but she was asking what kind of industries can actually be transformed by blockchain?
Well, I think that what's important to look at is how industry exists today. The simple answer, Kathy, is any industry. Mostly industries that have these middlemen organizations. Last time we talked a lot about the pharmacy industry and the $500 billion that's spent on just adjudicating payments and so forth in that industry. But when we look at it, we also talked about the real estate industry and how real estate agents could be a thing of the past. Any industry that needs to speed things up. I read an article about the agriculture industry and the Dreyfus funds. Apparently the Dreyfus financial funds are big investors in agricultural. And they just did a contract, the first contract on the blockchain. I think it was something like a $60 million deal. And they said it cut their processing time on that transaction in agriculture, which was a typical commodities transaction, from several weeks down to just a few days. So what we're seeing is this structure of blockchain and certifications. Of course, that's what BlockCert's all about, is block certifications of every step of the transaction happening rapidly and cutting out costs. So when we say eliminate the middleman and eliminate those fees, what we're talking about is being more expedient, being more efficient, being completely authenticated, and being able to do this anywhere from any device. So the answer is any industry that has something more than one or two stakeholders. Something that has two stakeholders is something like buying a retail good from Amazon. That's got two people, Amazon and you. But when you're looking at adding a third party in or multiple parties, now you're talking about a much more complex transaction where everybody needs to be authenticated and things need to be passed around quickly, checked off, and done. Most of the larger transactions we do in our lives, or transactions that require privacy and security, require this kind of interaction, and we can do that on the blockchain.
Sounds good. One of the other questions, I know we discussed it briefly last week, but could you go into the token regeneration, the ABC tokens? Robert was listening to you, and he wasn't sure if he got the entire story.
Sure. So ABC tokens, a BlockCerts token is designed in a unique fashion that it has a life cycle. And the life cycle goes A, B, C, A. So this token is very much like a dollar bill. So I'm going to use a dollar bill, and a dollar bill has 100 pennies in it. What we did with BlockCerts tokens is we decimalized them to 100 points. And those 100 points are called value notes. So just like if I have a dollar and I hand it to you, Jay, and I bought something from you for that dollar and you give me back the good. I could also hand you out of my dollar, get change and break it into 10 cents and hand you 10 cents and what have you. So this is how money actually works, is it's decimalized And we've decimalized BlockCerts. A lot of people don't know that decimalization actually in England happened just, I think, around 1971. It's not always been this way in the pound sterling. So that's the first thing to understand about money is it's decimalized so we can break it up and we can trade goods and services with it. Then we go into, well, how do we do validation? In a BlockCert, we use a token A, and before you can transfer that BlockCert to a smart contract and do a transaction, you have to be authenticated. And in many circles, this is called a KYC or Know Your Customer. It makes perfect sense if you think about it. When we're on the other side of a computer, we want to know that this for sure is the person we're dealing with. So BlockCerts allows that authentication to be done on the blockchain by looking at all different kinds of factors and saying, yeah, that's definitely Tim, that's definitely Jay. Now you can proceed into your contract. And because we've got these hundreds of thousands or millions of computers out there creating that transaction, it's pretty likely and almost 100%, if not 100%, that is a true validation. That's what trust or 100% authentication means. It can't be broken. Once we do that, we go from token A, now it's authenticated, to token B. That's where it attaches to the smart contract. And the smart contract is anything like we talked about. What are the terms and so forth? And who are all those authenticated people, individuals, players that are going to be part of this contract? So everybody's authenticated. They go to token B. Token B is where in this phase where the contract's actually going through its execution process. And that's all the terms of the contract being completed, people signing it, everybody agreeing, yes, this is what we've agreed to. Again, all of that sending out to the blockchain. So we've got 100% audit trail. Every change, every data change, every touch is recorded, and it's authenticated across these hundreds of thousands or millions of computers and cycles. Then it goes to token C where it's completed. Now, a completed contract is interesting because it can have a life after everybody agrees. Most and many contracts do, like a mortgage, for example, where you're making payments every month. That's a contract. And it continues in that token C phase until the mortgage is paid off. This could be 30 years. Well, obviously, we don't want to tie up our dollar or our BlockCert for 30 years while a mortgage is being paid off. So token C sits there and operates this automated smart contract that we just went through the process to get to, A, B, C. And at that point, it regenerates token A and returns that back to the holder. So that can be used again, just like a dollar bill cycles through the system. So now you can see that in the transaction, like a mortgage, where we go through all those phases, this mortgage is going to operate now automatically on the smart contract, and all the money that is generated from that can go back into the system. The BlockCert can go back to the token holder of record at that time and generate another transaction. So a regenerating token is extremely valuable to the token holder because it will always return back to you or somebody you transfer it to and be able to go through that process again and generate another transaction. So it's very much like money. And the more of those tokens you have and the more you cycle your money around to do these transactions, like interest on a loan, the more money that the token's going to be worth in the long term.
Great, and that leads right into a question from Jorge, and he's an investor who recently received our new investor deck, and he was asking if you say he invested $50,000 and he bought 1 million tokens, and we do our initial token offering. Now these tokens are available in the market, and he decides he doesn't want to sell the tokens to anybody else. He can incur internal revenue inside the tokens if they're being used through the ink that you explained last week. what he was wondering is there any way that he could see the revenue from tokens without he himself actually using them? Like, could he loan those tokens out to somebody else? Could you explain, what owners of tokens could do with their tokens?
Absolutely. I think that's why our model is so valuable and, in fact, so transformative about what software is. So think about it. A software company, Google, Microsoft, anybody who owns software, never sells you the software, do they? Let's think about Office 365 or what every big software company has done out there with their software. It used to be we'd go to the shelf, go to the software store. Remember when we went to the software store and we bought a CD? Well, all of that kind of transformed up to the cloud. How often do you get a CD in the mail anymore to install software?
Right. Or a Blockbuster video.
Or a Blockbuster video. It's streaming, and that's why we call this streaming transactions. But what's really interesting for Jorge or anybody who owns these tokens is they become the software company. And they, in effect, are lending or licensing that BlockCerts token to process a transaction. Isn't that exactly what we're doing when we license Microsoft Office 365 for our email and our Word? Microsoft didn't sell us Word, or they didn't sell us Excel. They lent it to us, gave us a license to use it, and every month they charge us $9.95 or whatever. So the reason this is transformative is there's a $90 billion a year market for software as a service tools like CRM and Dropbox and DocuSign and things like that. And all of those companies charge a recurring revenue. And that all goes to a centralized company. We're decentralizing that. And with every BlockCert token, you've got all of these tools that can be used for a smart contract and to run a business, because every business transaction, in effect, is a contract. And that token holder becomes the owner of that revenue stream. That's why it's transformative. So it's quite interesting that the companies that have been around for 30 and 40 years, the software companies that are doing this, and now are the cloud hosting companies, have created an environment where that can also be distributed. So they have to rethink their model. We've already rethought it. With BlockCerts, that's exactly what's going to happen. Is Jorge effectively becomes his own mini software company. And could be quite a big software company if he invests more than $50,000, or if these million tokens he now holds go up in value, just like software companies have. You can see better.
So we got a question from Regina, and she was asking, and it's kind of, her question was simply, what can I do with a token? But I think it's more important, what can a person do inside the software system that the token gives you access to?
Well, over the last decade, we've developed an incredibly powerful base of technology. And that's why when I'm asked this question, sometimes I call this BlockCerts token the SaaS or software as a service blockchain. In other words, every piece of software that a typical business uses is embedded and has access to be used with every single token. So you no longer need to go out and use an independent CRM. So think about this from a small business standpoint. If a small business has 10 employees, for example, and they need to do all these transactions with their customers and everything all the time, they're going to need a CRM to manage those customers. They're going to need a file management system to save all the documents. Obviously, they need email or something to pass all those documents around. Then they need a website, of course, to take the orders, maybe to take the service. They need a way to send PDFs around, or maybe a PDF system to get an e-signature, and then they need a way to build that customer. The average business today takes at least 5 different software tools to operate on the cloud. And each one of those software tools charges what's called a seat fee, or a flat monthly fee. So think about if it's anywhere from, it doesn't sound like a lot when you say $10 or $20, but take $10 or $20 times 5, or $30 times 5. Let's just use 30. That's kind of an average. That's $150 times 10 employees, because you have to have a seat for every employee. That's $1,500 a month. Now it's starting to sound like a lot more. Times 12 months, that's $18,000 a year. Now, if I want to do one transaction in that business, just one, and there's an employee that does one transaction, they still need to spend that $150. And many of these software as a service companies charge that annually. So now, as a small business, you're out there paying $18,000 a year. You have to pay it annually. So where does it go? It goes on your credit card, or it goes on your line of credit. So you're paying interest on top of that. It's not really a very efficient way to run a business. It's very expensive, in fact, to do it that way. With BlockCerts, you carry all of that through, and the only thing that's paid for is that one transaction, and it's vastly less than those costs, and it's not a fixed cost. So when we say it's transformative, it's truly transformative. Anybody can run as many as one transaction to thousands of transactions and spread those out everywhere without ever having to pay for that base cost, and they still have access to all those tools. So that's the result of 10 years worth of experience and 10 years worth of building and 1.5 million man hours, being able to carry all those tools in one transaction token that gives you access to literally everything. And every person that goes into this smart contract environment simply gets their login, logs on to a dashboard, and does their part of the work right there. We provide a front end, a mobile device front end, all the way to a big back office back end. And the BlockCerts ecosystem allows that all to happen by millions and millions of transactions. That's why we say we're bringing blockchain to the masses.
Which in fact was a question that we had, was how exactly we're going to do it. But this really turns, creates the whole software environment, the SaaS environment, reduces it essentially down to how we'd make a telephone call. A single call available to anybody.
That's right. If you think about it, Andrew, that's a really good point. Think about how cell phones or mobile phones started out. Mobile phones started out where we paid for every text message, we paid for every phone call, we paid for everything we used, and they were very expensive. And today you get these packages, so you get unlimited minutes, you get unlimited text, and every cell phone or mobile phone company competes for getting customers out there. And it's no longer this burdensome expense. The whole industry has shifted. And now with apps and so forth, it's all down to, do I use my mobile phone as my credit card now? And those are all transaction fees. So the entire world has moved kind of this transaction model, except that $90 billion worth of software as a service tools. So it makes perfect sense that when we bring blockchain out and we bring BlockCerts tool set out, that it would go that direction. And it's a huge opportunity. It's just like the evolution of the mobile phone.
Right. Well, thank you.
So Billy was asking, you talked a little earlier about authenticating Could you go into authentication a little bit and talk about how we authenticate people to make sure that Tim is Tim and Jay is Jay? And
yeah, authentication is really done. You've experienced authentication to a degree when you apply for a credit card online or something like that. The way it actually works is the BlockCert token picks up your identity from certain things you're asked to do, and those are defined by the user who's actually creating the smart contract, and what are the rules that you need to follow. So for example, if you're going to take a prescription medication and it's a narcotic, the bar of making sure it's you and not somebody who's going to sell this on the street for illegally is really high. So we need to know for sure that that's the person that's going to get this prescription medication without it being an illegal transfer. Same thing in finance. If we're going to do dollar transfers, we want to know for sure it's that person. So one way we do it is we create behind that smart contract a smart dashboard. And you log in, and maybe you log in and the first thing you have to do is take a selfie. Well, if I take a selfie on my mobile phone, I know that that's maybe Tim's mobile phone. We may be able to then send a response back to that mobile phone with, here, enter this authentication code next. And then I'm going to take a picture of my driver's license. And we can register that driver's license and actually look at the DMV. Is this Tim's driver's license? Has it been reported missing? Da, 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 da. All of that would be on the DMV, and does it actually have that number? We can then go do something else, like, say, ask somebody for a utility bill or what have you, and they scan that in, and then we can validate that. So we can go through the different layers to be very sure that that's happening, and also link it back to the actual device and IP address of that individual. So that's the first level of authentication. Now, because of all this data and artificial intelligence and so forth, the more of those transactions you do, the more of a digital signature or digital authentication you get. What's important is every time we've done that, we've placed that information out on the BlockCert blockchain. And it's private. The BlockCert blockchain is private, but it's recording through the algorithm this number, and that becomes your building certification. So when you go through this several times, you may not need to go through it again and again and again. You now have this digital signature, we'll call it, and we know it's you. And it's pretty clear then if you're coming from somewhere new. It's a different device, it's a different IP address. We might ask you for something else. And the fact that we can capture all this data and put it on the blockchain and encrypt it and decrypt it and look where it's all coming from gives us a 100% validity that it's you. And if it's not, and you can't pass the test, you're going to be stopped right there in your tracks. Maybe you'll be contacted, depending on what the business behind the smart contract is doing, to take you to the next level. So we can really make sure that these are the real people, down to facial recognition. I just recently got a new Microsoft Surface, and when I sit down at my desk now, it looks at my face and recognizes me. So there's the technology's there. We put it down onto the blockchain. It gives you the digital signature, and now you're good to go as far as being authenticated, and you can enter that contract. We don't have a lot of questions about that, and it's all on the blockchain, so it can't be hacked, and you can't just take a picture of Tim's face, put it in front of the computer, and fool the computer, because there are too many other factors all tied into the blockchain that say, yep, that's Tim.
So they followed up with another question. Do you have to validate each time to transact on the system?
You don't. The way we've designed the BlockCerts token is once you've validated at whatever level is required for this particular contract you're going into, you get a QR code. And that QR code is tied to your profile. So you can literally scan that. And if the level of validation is sufficient for the smart contract you're going into, say I just need to renew my medication or I need to make a withdrawal, that's fine. But it might require you to do something else if you're going to go, say, take a $300,000 loan out as a mortgage. So that really, again, boils down to what's the smart contract. But you're not going to go through every step every single time because you've got your QR code, and that's getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So smart contract, smart authentication, smart dashboard, smart devices, smart technology.
Great. I had one call or question from Bill, and he was asking about, he's another investor who got the deck, and he said, this all sounds good, but there have been so many failed ICOs out there. Can you kind of comment on the landscape in the ICO realm?
Well, one of my favorite stories is one of the companies, and I won't use the name of the company, it's easy enough to find, was last July I was listening to a podcast and the founder was speaking and she said, oh, well, we spent 9 months doing this, and they had raised $200 million in their ICO. And, you know, when I listened to that podcast, I was thinking 9 months? I've been at this technology game for 20 years. I've spent a decade, written a couple of patents, gotten one granted. You can't do much in technology in 9 months. So you can tell a big story, but in my day, we used to call that vaporware. And a lot of these ICOs came out, and they were really well thought out white papers. But all that is pretty much what we call in the business a requirements document. This is a vision. This is envisioning, and it's been around forever, envisioning what might be. But to go from what might be to what actually is, the true engineering behind it is a feat. And that's why maybe you can count on one, maybe 1.5 hands, how many truly successful companies there are out there and why the billions and billions of dollars it takes to build technology exists and the time. So I love what Steve Jobs said. When you really look behind an overnight success, there's generally a very, very, very long, it took a very, very long time to do it. So when you look at that, these ICOs that came out last year and they were run up, it was pretty much speculation and story. It wasn't solid technology behind it. There's one I love called Brave, and Brave came out, but look at the history of the guy who brought out the Brave browser. He was involved with the Mozilla Firefox browser, one of the founders there. He invented or was one of the inventors of JavaScript, which is a huge code base language, and started building that browser about 2 years before they did their ICO. True utility token. There was real engineering there. There was real knowledge. There was real functionality. And when they launched, they already had the browser running. It's very similar to BlockCerts. We have true functionality here. We've done over $3 billion worth of real transaction, put 4 million participants through the platform that now enables BlockCerts to work. And that took a decade and 1.5 million plus man hours to do. So when you hear, yeah, we've been at this for 9 months, you kind of go, 9 months, $200 million, it doesn't quite fit. That's why you see failed ICOs, because even if you get the money in, do you have the horsepower, the true technology, the true engineering to actually pull it off? And the answer is no. About So far, I think the statistic is about 50% of them never have gone anywhere, or were just kind of stories in the first place.
Okay, we've got Ginger with a question. She's asking, where are you operating right now? Are you just national, or is it an international? What kind of operation do you have? And she was asking more about, she asked me about the team members. Where does your team exist?
So the history of the company is we've been based in Canada. We've had a tremendous amount of support from the Canadian government. We couldn't have done this without the Canadian government grants, and members of the scientific and experimental research and development grants. National Research Council gave us grants. So first of all, we've got operations in Canada. We also have operations in the United States. So we exist in both of in all of North America. About half a decade ago now, 5 years ago, we incorporated in India. There's more people that speak English in India than in the United States and Canada combined. I don't think people know that. And there's some brilliant engineers in India. Some amazing stuff's come out of there. We've built an incredible team and corporate structure in India to help build. We're operating out of Europe. And so from a standpoint of where we build all over the world. We've got some build in South America. When it comes to our actual market, right now we're working on use cases in Africa, in India, in Canada, and in the United States. We've got some entry into Europe, but we don't have a specific use case out there at the moment. But we certainly have major use cases throughout all of North America, India, and Africa thus far.
Great, and I found out why she asked that question. Ginger's from Australia, and she was asking if you plan on expanding into that part of Asia.
Well, blockchain is global. We're an international company. We've always been international. We've done business overseas forever. So the globe is getting smaller and smaller. Protectionism and politics aside, there is brilliance anywhere on any side of the planet. We will go wherever we can help, make connections, bring this to the masses, make things run more efficiently, provide access where access hasn't been, provide inclusion in financial markets and technology markets, and get rid of the gaps. That's what BlockCerts' mission is. We're going to continue to push to go internationally. That's why I spent our first launch of this year in Europe, India, Africa. I literally went around the world to truly launch and get BlockCerts out there. So yes, we'll go to Australia. I've never been there myself, and I'd love to go.
Well, we'll have to put you in touch with Ginger then.
That would be great.
So George was asking, where can you buy BCert tokens?
BCert tokens right now are being offered on a pre-sale basis, a private placement basis, and you can get them on the private placement by contacting you, Jay, by going to credencecode.com and registering, or blockcerts.com, and one of our team will get back with you. You can see the people on our team. We've got a very extensive team, including lawyers and accountants and technology people. And so contact us on the team page. The current offering is going to close, I believe, on March 23rd. And we're offering at 5 cents a token right now. After March 23rd, it's going up to 10 cents. That's only open to accredited investors. And if you don't know what that is, you'll have to speak with one of the people on our team so they can let you know. But that's how you get into the BlockCerts tokens right now.
Thanks. And, this is Jay again, and and I am working on this private pre-sale. So the way we have it structured is right now what we did, because this goes back to that question about failed ICOs. A lot of people invested in ICOs and they didn't really know what they were investing in. They just thought, wow, this looks great. The marketing is good. There's a lot of hype around it. I'm sure this is going to be a great company, and they buy into these tokens, but they don't really look into the company, and they really get no kind of risk disclosure or any kind of investor awareness. So what we did is we took an alternate approach. We looked at the way things were looking with the SEC and the government and the way they're starting to look at ICOs, and we said, let's do something a little different. We have an existing platform. We have a real token that has utility value, because when you have these tokens, you'll be able to operate your business on the blockchain. But for right now, the SEC is kind of looking them as securities. And since we don't have the tokens today, we haven't minted them yet. This was back when we first wrote our offering. We decided to do something a little different. We went ahead and wrote a private placement memorandum that put all the risk disclosures and all the investor awareness that you need into a document, and then included it with a simple agreement for future tokens, which means all of the people who buy our BCert tokens today at 5 cents are not going to get tokens. They're going to get an agreement that they will receive tokens at our initial token offering, which we're projecting to be in April or May. At that time, they'll receive their tokens and they can start using them, because the platform they will have been built out, tested. We have a couple of big use cases that we're working on right now that will really add functionality to the platform as far as user interface and user experience. And so when Tim talks about the 5 cent token, that's the private pre-sale token that accredited investors can get by going to our website, logging in, and getting access to the offering documents. Once we do the ITO, then the tokens will be available to anybody, because it'll be a utility token. You'll be able to buy them, use them, loan them, or do any of the other many things that you're going to be able to do with the BlockCerts token. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit, George.
Great. Thanks, Jay. That was a better explanation than I was able to give. So,
well, that's why you hired me.
Awesome.
I'm through my queue of questions. I was wondering if Robert Gerard, our president, or Andrew, our customer engagement specialist, if either of you have any more questions for Tim. Or
we had a question from James, but it basically got answered. So, and that
well,
was,
great.
Well,
Yeah.
That's a good 40 minutes. I think we can wrap this. And thank you, Tim, for coming back. We're here every Friday, folks, so ask us anything.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us and for listening to our podcast. Again, this will be available online and every Friday at 11 o'clock. Ask me anything. We're here to bring blockchain to the world and to the masses and make smart contracts the fundamental way of doing business.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you.